We are now just 10 days away from the start of the NFL season, kicking off in Arrowhead, Lions versus the Chiefs. I cannot wait. I think whenever football comes on, it is the absolute best time of the year, my favorite time of the year. So I thought with the season so close, I would start putting out my official predictions. And these are predictions that I'm going to be referencing the entire season. So I'm going to be doing my picks for the NFC playoff teams, obviously AFC playoff teams. I already did my MVP prediction video. You can go watch that. And then, of course, the blue blood of this channel, the most popular series, is my power rankings. So I'll be putting out my pre-week 1 power rankings very soon. So stay tuned to that. But now, let's get into my official NFC playoff predictions. Winning the NFC North, I have the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, this division has very quickly become one of the best divisions in football. We just saw this division put 3 teams in the playoffs last year: the Eagles, the Cowboys, the Giants. So, the Eagles, why do I have them winning this division? Well, I think pretty simply they have the best roster, not in this division, but the entire conference. I know that they had some key departures from their team, most notably both their coordinators, offensive and defensive, and even more notably than Jonathan Gannon going to Arizona. I mean, yeah, it sucks to lose him, but Shane Steichen is a massive loss, the offensive coordinator for Philly, who went to be the head coach for the Colts. We're going to see. This is going to be a very big make-it-or-break-it year for Nick Sirianni, because it was not looking pretty whenever he was calling the plays. He turned the play calling over to Steichen, and it looked a lot more fluid. And, of course, Steichen is credited with the development of Hurts, and he's given a lot of props for that. All that being said, I know that they lost a couple of their players on the defensive side of the ball, most notably, but you still look at all the key positions on a football team. The Philadelphia Eagles still have elite Pro Bowl players in every single unit you could want. Offensive line, they still have the best offensive line in the NFL. Despite the age, despite a couple departures, you still have the core of that line: Jason Kelce, Lane Johnson, strong as a castle wall. I mean, it really is the best line in football. You have Jalen Hurts, just was runner-up to MVP, and losing in the Super Bowl after putting up a phenomenal performance. I think you're going to add another chip to his shoulder, a guy who's always hungry for more. And, of course, you have an incredible receiving core. The defense, you got Pro Bowlers everywhere, especially that secondary. I think you can argue is the best secondary in the NFL to this day. So all that being said, just the collective unit of this team. I love the roster. But I will say it is kind of a big year for Sirianni. We're going to see just how good of a head coach he is. But they're still my pick for the NFC. I still think they're the cream of the crop in the NFC. And for my NFC South winner, I have the New Orleans Saints. Now, this is a team that has missed the playoffs the last 2 seasons. However, they did make the key acquisition at quarterback, Derek Carr, the position they've obviously been missing since Drew Brees has been gone. I just think given this division, it's not very strong. I think the Saints have the best roster in this division. They have the best quarterback in this division. And I think they're just the most stable team, because you look at Atlanta, I like some weapons they have there, but Arthur Smith has a losing record as a head coach, and I don't trust Desmond Ridder. He's too unproven. Carolina, again, there's a lot of stuff I like. I think Carolina can be good very quickly. Maybe in a year or 2, Carolina could be really good. It's just, again, unproven with Bryce Young. Frank Reich's, obviously, this is his first year there. There's a lot of unproven stuff there. And then, obviously, Tampa. They struggled last year with Tom Brady. So now they have Baker, and I like Baker, but if your team struggled with the GOAT, you're going to have some problems with Baker. And, of course, they've already had some injuries. Ryan Jensen, their all-pro center, is done for the season, so that's already just a horrible knock for them. But looking just specifically at the Saints, like I said, you have the best quarterback in division, Derek Carr. I know he's coming off of a disappointing season last year. However, if you go 1 year back, I still think it is the crowning achievement of Derek Carr's career. Getting that dumpster fire of a Raiders team into the playoffs, I still give Derek Carr a lot of credit for that. You had the whole John Gruden scandal, that mess happening, the Henry Ruggs disaster happening, all within that season, and obviously having an interim head coach. It would be very understandable if it just went off the rails. But no, Derek Carr had a phenomenal year and led them to the playoffs that year. I still give him leeway there. I like the weapons on this team. Despite Alvin Kamara's off-the-field issues, I still think he's one of the most versatile backs in the league. Chris Olave coming off a phenomenal rookie year. And Michael Thomas is actually supposed to play this year. Now, I got to believe it, or I got to see it before I believe it with Michael Thomas, because it feels like he hasn't played in like 8,000 years. But if he plays, hopefully you can get some production out of him. And then, of course, the defense is still solid. You still got the Mario Davis, Cam Jordan, Marlon Humphrey, of course, or not him, Lattimore. Sorry, they were the same class. I mixed them up. And you have a defensive head coach. So I just think they're the most stable team in the division. And for my NFC West winner, I have the San Francisco 49ers. I contend that you can make a case that Kyle Shanahan legitimately is the best head coach in the NFL. I know he doesn't have the jewelry to show for it. However, you look at what he's had for his quarterback play in terms of the injuries to Jimmy G, elevating Brock Purdy last year. They've been to, 3 NFC championship games in his tenure as head coach, and also being in a Super Bowl, and they led that Super Bowl late against Mahomes. It's just, of course, Mahomes happened in the clutch. Nothing you can really do there. But the tenure under Shanahan has just been immaculate. The construction of this roster, I really believe, is unparalleled in the NFL. If you just gave this team a competent level quarterback, like, I don't know, maybe Jimmy Garoppolo, this team, I think, could really compete for a Super Bowl. But it just so happens that they got rid of Jimmy G. They were, very quickly pushing him out of the door, obviously, to elevate Trey Lance. We know how that worked out. He's no longer on the team. They kind of got bailed out by Brock Purdy. It's going to be interesting this year to see if Brock Purdy can replicate that magic that he had. He went something like 7-0 or 8-0 to close off last season. Basically looked like the second coming of Kurt Warner. And again, I give a lot of credit of that to Kyle Shanahan. But this offense is insane. I mean, just the schemes, the playmakers you have all over this offense. You have a very competent offensive line with the best left tackle in football. You have, like I said, playmakers everywhere. Deebo Samuel, one of the most versatile players in the NFL. Brandon Ayuk, extremely reliable. Christian McCaffrey's the best running back in the NFL when he's playing. George Kittle, at worst, is the third best tight end in the NFL. And then you flip on the defensive side of the ball. I think it's not really that controversial, I think, to say that the Niners have the best defense in the NFL. I mean, they are just Pro Bowlers everywhere. The secondary, they always seem to just find random guys to throw in the secondary. They play 1 year with the Niners, and they're just Pro Bowlers. Like Jimmy Ward came out of nowhere as a Pro Bowler. I know he left now, but that Tafunga guy, whatever his name is, he came out of nowhere. He was a Pro Bowler last year, the safety. Then, of course, you have Fred Warner and Bosa, both made my top 10 defensive players. So limited at quarterback, but the rest of the roster is just too talented, and you have too good of a head coach for this team to not win this division, in my opinion. Now, it feels weird to pick the Detroit Lions to win a division, but for the NFC North, I do have Detroit. I can't even tell you the last time they've won this division. Ever since I started watching football back in 2015, I think they've only made the playoffs one time since I watched, and I think that was 2016 or 17, something like that. But it's obviously been a long time. It's been a rough time for Detroit, but I feel like they finally put the pieces together to be the best team in this division. They got a lot of momentum from last season. I don't think anyone had them winning 9 games last year, so I think that was obviously a nice big step in the right direction. And then, of course, I think they finally found their head coach. They bounced around head coaches for years now, but I think they finally found their guy in Dan Campbell. I originally wasn't a fan of his. And he still, I don't think, is the great X's and O's guy, but in terms of motivation, he's second to none in the NFL. I mean, he's just the type of guy you want to run through a wall for. And I think they finally found their quarterback. It's not like Jared Goff's going to light up the highlight reel, but in terms of production, in terms of not turning the ball over, Jared Goff is that. He's the quintessential game manager. And if you put the weapons around him like Detroit is seeming to do now, and you keep them upright like they do, Detroit challenges for best offensive line in the league. They're really putting together a monstrous offensive line with a really nice receiving core. Amon-Ra St. Brown is now starting to threaten, I think, for top 10 receiver in the NFL. Garrett Wilson, of course, whenever he gets back off the suspension, he's going to be incredible. And then you drafted Jahmyr Gibbs. I know a lot of people were pushing back on that, but I think this guy's going to be an absolute stud. Alabama has been nothing but producing just tanks, beasts for skills positions, receivers and running backs. Bama just puts out great products. Jahmyr Gibbs, I think, is going to be another part of that. And then, of course, the defense. I know their defense was really bad last year, but I feel like they made some really key acquisitions in terms of their secondary, of course. Stealing Cam Sutton from my Steelers still pains me that he's gone, but I wish him well, of course. They got C.J. Gardner-Johnson, whatever his name is. It always messes me up, from Philly. He was incredible for them last year. And then, of course, Aiden Hutchinson is just going to only be a year better. So I feel like you got a lot of momentum going on. I really liked their draft and their offseason moves. And they're just going to be a fun team to watch, I think. And the NFL trusts them to be an entertaining team. That's why they put them week 1 against the Chiefs opening day. And for the first wildcard team, we have the Dallas Cowboys. This team seems like they're always just a perennial 10-win team at least. Now, I've seen some people putting Dallas even over Philadelphia to take the division. I'm not that high on Dallas. I'll get to that in a little bit. But let's talk about the pros of this team. I mean, you just got talented players all over this team. You finally got Zach Martin back off of his holdout, which is obviously integral. I mean, your offensive line, you needed him back, especially with the limitations of this line. So that's really good, of course. You still got Dak. I'll talk about Dak in a second, but I think Dak's a little bit more of a mixed bag. But, you know, we all know he can be productive in the regular season. He always puts up big numbers. The weapons core, of course, CeeDee Lamb. I'm expecting a massive breakout year for CeeDee Lamb. Like, we already know he's a really good player. He's already considered like a star-level player. But I think this is the year where you see CeeDee Lamb break out as a superstar. I am expecting that. I have that big of expectations for CeeDee Lamb, and I'm hoping, fingers crossed, he falls to me in the second round of my fantasy league. And then Brandon Cooks, they just brought him in from Houston. And the guy has, go look it up, Brandon Cooks, every single season in the NFL, or maybe not every season, but like the last 8 seasons, he just put up 1,000 yards. It doesn't matter who his quarterback is. The guy just produces. And now he's going to be the number 2 in this Dallas offense. I expect a big year for him. Michael Gallup's going to be back fully healthy finally. Tony Pollard now gets full reps as the number 1 running back. There's no, question mark as if it's him or Zeke. No, he's now the unquestioned number 1 back. And I've been pulling for Tony Pollard for like 2 or 3 years now as the better running back on the Cowboys. And finally, Dallas realized that with getting rid of Zeke. Then defensively, this team, I mean, you could talk yourself into thinking they could have the number 1 defense in the NFL. Micah Parsons, I had him in my top 5 defensive players in the NFL, and then the secondary is just insane. It's lights out. You have Trevon Diggs, of course, the ultimate playmaker at the cornerback position. Bring in Stephon Gilmore, who only, just a couple years removed won Defensive Player of the Year. And, of course, really good pass rush, and then you have probably the best defensive coordinator in the NFL in Dan Quinn. Can't remember, Dan Quinn. But yeah, they're just really talented. I think they are limited by Dak and his interceptions, but they're still too good to not make playoffs. And for our Wild Card 2 team, we have the Seattle Seahawks. And you want to talk about one of the worst trades in NFL history, the Denver Broncos bringing Russ and what they gave up to bring him in, and what Seattle's done since Russ has been gone. I mean, the past 2 drafts Seattle has had, I think, are absolute out-of-the-park home runs. I mean, the year prior, you got Tariq Woolen, who was basically an all-pro level cornerback as a rookie. I mean, rivaled Sauce Gardner. He was that good. And then this year, you just got Witherspoon, who's also projected to be a phenomenal cornerback. So it's like you're building LOB 2.0. You bring Bobby Wagner back. He was with the Rams last year, but he's now back in Seattle. Looking back, that's going to be kind of weird on his career that he spent that one random year in LA. But he is back now. He's still a phenomenal elite-level linebacker. They could use a little help in the pass rush department, but in terms of, their secondary and their linebacking core, I think it is phenomenal. And you look at the offensive side of the ball. Geno Smith, by far away his best year last year, winning Comeback Player of the Year, and he was the player with the highest quarterback rating last year. Now, I'm not expecting Geno to replicate that. I mean, he certainly could, but I'm just not expecting it just because of how good he was. But even if you're getting like 80% of what Geno Smith was last year, this team will be a playoff team. You look at the offensive playmakers on this team. I mean, again, going back to their draft, they've been incredible with developing that offensive line these past 2 years. The weapons, like I said, DK Metcalf, a legit number 1 receiver in the NFL. I mean, he's really in that mold of a Calvin Johnson, of a Julio Jones. Not that he's as good as those guys, but he's like that physical, dominant, just I'm going to dunk on you, 50-50 ball, I'm grabbing it. Tyler Lockett, one of the most reliable number 2 receivers in the NFL. And then getting Jackson Smith and Jigba. I mean, he is going to be a monster. And then similar to Alabama, like I said, Ohio State has really become wide receiver U. Anytime you get a receiver from Ohio State, I just kind of pencil in that they're going to have 1,000 yards automatically. So You got those three guys for Geno to throw the ball to. You got Kenneth Walker before the injury was incredible as a rookie running back last year. And then, of course, Pete Carroll, Hall of Fame head coach, bringing this all together. There's just too much to like for Seattle. They're in a pretty light division with the Rams and the Cardinals. Obviously, the Niners are a little more tough, but those two other teams don't scare me. So Seattle makes it in. And for my final team making the playoffs in the NFC, I have the New York Football Giants. Now, I've been a lot more cynical on the Giants this offseason than some other people have. I got a lot of flack from Giants fans about the Saquon Barkley issue. I mean, a lot of them were telling me that Saquon was overrated and that Daniel Jones really was like the heartbeat of this offense. I still disagree with those Giants fans. I think Saquon is the heart and soul of the offense. And the reason why Daniel Jones had such a good year last year, of course, Dable, but having Saquon to rely on, I mean, he's just such a versatile tool for the offense. I mean, the fact that he's back now is why I have the Giants in the playoffs. Because if you remember, if you watched that video, it was one of my highest viewed videos. It was a short about how the Giants were going to miss playoffs if Saquon didn't play. Well, he's playing this year. And again, this is another contract year, so I think he has more motivation to have another great season. So having him back is great. He obviously brought in Darren Waller, who, I mean, he's a monster. People forget how good Darren Waller was when he was healthy. You have him for Daniel Jones to throw the ball to, which I really like because he needs more weapons. I think that's kind of a limitation of the Giants is they do need some better receiver play. But they did get Jalen Hyatt from Tennessee. Watch out for him. I think he's going to be really good. And then, of course, defensively, this is one of the more stable defenses in the NFL. I mean, they don't have many star players, but they're just coached up really well. Dexter Lawrence has really come into his own as one of the best defensive linemen in the NFL. And then, of course, you have the star of this team. He doesn't even play for the team. Brian Dable, the head coach, just won Coach of the Year, did a phenomenal job. I mean, he's the reason why Daniel Jones got that big contract, that $40 million contract, where the year before it was looking like Daniel Jones might be done in terms of a starter in the NFL. 1 year with Brian Dable, he got a $40 million annual contract. That's the impact of Brian Dable. That's how good of a head coach he is. But that is it for my NFC playoff team predictions. Definitely go ahead and leave yours in the comments down below. I'm sure this video won't be controversial at all. Definitely stay tuned for my AFC playoff team prediction and stay tuned for the power rankings. If you made it this far, I really appreciate it. Go ahead and leave a like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.